Hide your money from him." The voice was so sudden, so hollow, that the porcelain mug nearly slipped from my hands, clinking sharply against the marble sink. I turned around slowly. My mother-in-law, Catherine, stood in the doorway. She had perfect posture, not a single wrinkle on her pressed beige blouse, but her eyes held something heavy and piercing. Did you say something, Catherine?" I tried to force a polite smile, though my stomach tightened. We had just moved into her spacious, two-story suburban home 3 days ago, but the air already felt thick, like the calm before a storm. "I said exactly what you heard." Catherine took a step forward. The kitchen smelled of fresh espresso and an unsettling old silence. "You manage that floral boutique. You get tips, extra event commissions. Never. Do you hear me, Sarah? Never tell my son exactly how much you make. A woman always needs a secret stash." I felt the heat rush to my cheeks. Pure indignation bubbled up in my throat. "Kyle is my husband," I answered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We don't keep secrets. We're a team. We moved in here to save up for the escrow and down payment on our own house, not to hide cash in shoeboxes. Kyle works day and night for our future." "Day and night," Catherine echoed, her lips twisting into a strange, almost bitter smile. "Oh, what a naive girl you are. Men will swear they love you, and then leave you with empty bank accounts and a ruined credit score. Starting next month, you will give me $800 in cash. For rent. And Kyle doesn't need to know. Tell him your boutique sales are down." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. But we agreed. Kyle said we were staying here rent-free so we could save. My house. My rules. If you don't like it, the door is right there. Catherine turned sharply and walked out, leaving me alone with my shock. I leaned back against the cold subway tile. She wants to break us up, the panicked thought hammered in my brain. She's draining my savings and forcing me to lie to Kyle to plant seeds of distrust. What a manipulative woman. I thought of my husband, my Kyle. Tall, always smiling, so attentive. Just yesterday, he came home exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from his financial advising firm. Yet he still brought me my favorite macarons from the bakery downtown. He kissed my hands and whispered, "Just hold on a little longer, baby. I'm closing a massive portfolio deal. Soon we'll have our own place and move out of Mom's." He was perfect. And this woman was just jealous of our happiness. She probably never accepted that her son loved someone else. But I had no idea that the real nightmare hadn't even begun. That entire evening I walked around in a daze. When Kyle got home, I wanted to throw my arms around his neck and tell him about his mother's bizarre extortion. But something stopped me. Kyle was completely on edge. He spent way too long washing his hands in the bathroom, avoided making eye contact, and his thumbs were flying across his phone screen in a panicked rhythm. When I asked him how his day at the accounting firm went, he just brushed me off. "Supplier issues, audits. Don't worry your pretty head about it," he muttered and quickly disappeared into the bedroom. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a tangled mess of anxiety. Around 3 a.m., I woke up feeling parched. Carefully, so as not to wake Kyle, who was tossing and turning restlessly, I slipped out from under the duvet and stepped into the dark hallway. I had almost reached the top of the stairs when I heard a rustling sound coming from the foyer downstairs. I froze, pressing myself against the wall. In the dim glow of the street lamp filtering through the glass door, I saw Catherine. She was standing by the coat rack. Her hands were frantically digging through the pockets of Kyle's expensive wool trench coat. I held my breath. What is she doing? Is she stealing from her own son? Suddenly, Catherine's fingers found a crumpled piece of paper. She pulled it out, bringing it close to her eyes, squinting to read the text in the semi-darkness. Immediately, the older woman's shoulders sagged. She pressed the paper to her chest, letting out a quiet, choked sound, somewhere between a groan and a sob. With trembling hands, she pulled a cell phone from the pocket of her silk robe. She could barely dial the number. "Hello?" Catherine whispered into the receiver. Her usually commanding voice was now tight, like a wire, ready to snap. "It's me. I saw the new numbers. I'm begging you, give me just a few more days. I'll pawn whatever I have left. Just don't touch him. If she finds out, it will destroy their marriage." I covered my mouth with both hands to stifle a scream and tiptoed frantically back to the bedroom. My heart was pounding in my temples. What numbers? Who is in danger? Who will be destroyed? Has this woman dragged us into some kind of criminal underworld? The next morning felt surreal, like I was watching my own life through dirty glass. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast, but I couldn't stomach a bite. Kyle sat across from me. It was only then that I truly noticed how much he had changed over the last few weeks. His custom-tailored dress shirt hung off him like a hanger. Deep, bruised shadows lived under his eyes, and the fingers gripping his coffee mug were visibly shaking. "Honey, are you feeling okay?" I softly touched his wrist. His skin was ice cold. Kyle flinched as if I had burned him and yanked his hand away. "I'm fine, Sarah. I told you, it's the big four." The partners are breathing down my neck. "It's just a rough quarter." He didn't look me in the eye. He chugged his coffee, kissed the side of my head, and practically sprinted out the door. I was alone. At least, I thought I was, until I heard the soft shuffle of slippers behind me. Catherine walked up to the island counter and silently placed an empty white envelope in front of me. "Today is the 10th. Your payday." Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. $800. "And I hope you haven't forgotten our little chat. Kyle is not to know a thing." I looked into my mother-in-law's cold, faded eyes and saw the woman who had been digging through her son's pockets in the dead of night and was now cold-bloodedly robbing me. But I didn't have the energy to fight. I pulled my wallet from my purse, counted out the bills, and tossed them on the marble counter. "Take it! I hope this money brings you happiness." I snapped and walked out, slamming the front door behind me. At work, I couldn't focus on anything. I was mechanically trimming rose stems while Catherine's words echoed in my head. "I'll pawn whatever I have left. Just don't touch him." Who is him? Kyle? But he's a grown, successful financial auditor. Did Catherine get involved in some shady scheme to pay off her own debts? And now thugs are threatening her son? At 5 p.m., I told my manager I had a family emergency and left early. I had to know the truth. The bus dropped me off 2 blocks from our subdivision. I was just about to turn down our street when I spotted a familiar figure. It was Catherine. She was walking fast, constantly looking over her shoulder, a dark scarf wrapped tightly around her head even though it was a warm spring afternoon. Without a second thought, I followed her. I kept my distance, hiding behind mailboxes and parked SUVs, feeling like the lead in a cheap detective movie. But I couldn't stop. She turned into a run-down strip mall and slipped through a door with a buzzing neon sign that read, "Pawn and Loans." I waited by the pharmacy next door, my eyes glued to the entrance. 20 minutes later, Catherine walked out. The heavy gold heirloom necklace she had worn every day for decades was gone. Instead, she was clutching a thick, brown paper envelope. She didn't head home. She walked straight to an abandoned park on the edge of town. There, idling by a dry fountain, was a blacked-out, lifted SUV with no license plates. A heavy-set man in a leather jacket stepped out. Catherine rushed up to him, speaking quickly, her hands pleading. The man roughly snatched the envelope from her, flipped through the cash, spat on the ground, and hissed something through his teeth. Catherine stumbled back, as if he had slapped her. She nodded, covered her face with her hands, and walked away. My legs gave out. I had just watched my husband's mother hand over a thick stack of cash to a criminal. And I knew I had to find proof before this woman destroyed us all. I waited until Catherine was completely out of sight before I sprinted back home. I needed proof. I had to show Kyle exactly who we were living with before this woman destroyed everything we had built. I ran into the empty house. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I opened the door to my mother-in-law's bedroom. It smelled of lavender potpourri and old face powder. I started pulling open dresser drawers. Nothing. Just linens, old photograph albums, and blood pressure medication. Then I reached for the top shelf of her closet and felt something hard. It was a vintage, floral-patterned cookie tin. I pried the lid off. Inside lay a thick, navy blue folder. The first document I pulled out was a copy of the escrow agreement for the brand-new 2-bedroom townhouse Kyle and I had been dreaming of. The one we had been saving every spare penny for. But that wasn't the terrifying part. Underneath the agreement was a promissory note for a massive sum, $250,000. And at the bottom, under the jagged, almost illegible signature of the creditor, was a scribbled last name that made my vision blur. Sterling. Our family name. I, Catherine Sterling, promised to repay. The sum was astronomical, the kind of cash people use to buy businesses, not borrow from street loan sharks. But the worst document was buried at the very bottom. It was a copy of a cancellation request to the property developer. According to this paper, our entire down payment, the $60,000 we had scraped together over 4 grueling years, had been refunded directly into Catherine's personal checking account. The walls of the bedroom seemed to shrink, squeezing the air from my lungs. She stole our house fund, my pulse hammered in my ears. She took our future to pay off those thugs by the fountain. And now she's keeping us here as hostages, squeezing rent out of me to cover the interest. Suddenly, I heard the turn of a key in the front door. I shoved the papers back into the tin, slammed it onto the top shelf, and darted out of her bedroom just a second before the hallway lights flicked on. It was Kyle. I leaned against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. When Kyle finally walked into the bedroom, I barely recognized him. He smelled of cheap gas station coffee, stale tobacco, and something sour. The distinct smell of extreme stress. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room, never once landing on me. Kyle, I started softly, stepping closer. We need to talk, seriously. About your mother, and about our townhouse. He jerked back as if he'd been electrocuted. His phone, which he had been gripping like a lifeline, dropped to the carpet with a dull thud. What is wrong with my mother now, Sarah? His voice was unusually harsh, cracking with exhaustion. Please, just don't start. My head is splitting. You don't understand. She's not who you think she is. I saw her today. She was... Enough, Kyle suddenly roared, so loudly the window panes rattled. In 4 years of marriage, he had never raised his voice at me. His face flushed with angry red splotches, and a fine sweat broke out on his forehead. My mother does everything for us. She let us into her home, and you're constantly looking for problems where there are none. I'm exhausted, Sarah. I just want some peace. He spun around, snatched his phone off the floor, and locked himself in the master bathroom. I heard the deadbolt click, followed instantly by the roar of the shower, drowning out all other sounds. I stood in the middle of the room, wrapping my arms around myself. Why is he defending her so fiercely? I thought in despair. Is he that blind? Or did she somehow threaten him too? The next 2 days were pure hell. Kyle avoided me completely. He left for his firm before dawn and returned long past midnight, blaming end-of-quarter audits and Catherine. Catherine seemed to sense my weakness. That morning, she cornered me by the front door. You're 800. It's not enough, she said, arms crossed over her chest. Her gaze was heavy and impenetrable. Inflation is up. Property taxes are expensive. Starting next month, you'll be giving me $1,200. Are you out of your mind? I hissed, feeling my lips tremble. I barely make more than that. What am I supposed to live on? I don't care, she snapped, taking a step toward me. If you want to live under my roof, you pay. And remember, Kyle knows nothing. If you breathe a word to him, I'll have you thrown out of this house with nothing but the clothes on your back, and you will never see my son again. She turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving me to swallow my bitter, angry tears. But this time, I wasn't going to cry. Instead of fear, a cold, calculating rage woke up inside me. You will not take my husband and my life, I promised her, retreating back. I realized I needed the perfect moment. A moment when Kyle was home, when Catherine couldn't hide behind her threats. I was going to throw that blue folder at their feet and force her to confess. I was going to rip off her mask of the domineering matriarch once and for all. I didn't have to wait long. That Friday, Kyle came home unusually early, but the sight of him made me freeze in absolute horror. He stood in the entryway, pale as a ghost. His expensive suit jacket was filthy and torn at the shoulder, and a dark, vicious bruise was blooming across his cheekbone. Kyle, oh my God, what happened? I screamed, rushing toward him, but he pushed my hands away. At the sound of my scream, Catherine rushed out of the kitchen. When the older woman saw her son, all the color drained from her face. We locked eyes, me with confusion and terror, her with absolute, deadly realization that time had run out. That's it. I am done with these sick lies. My voice rang with pure steel. I don't remember how I crossed the distance to her room, or how I broke a nail prying the lid off that vintage cookie tin. I was trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was pure, concentrated adrenaline. I grabbed the blue folder so hard the cardboard crumpled in my grip and marched back into the living room. Kyle was leaning heavily against a dining chair, his head bowed. A drop of blood was slowly sliding from his busted lip onto the collar of his ruined shirt. Catherine stood a few feet away, frozen like a wax statue. The room was dead silent. "I am done playing this sick game," my voice sliced through the quiet. I slammed the blue folder onto the glass coffee table. Papers flew across the rug. Catherine didn't even blink. She just stared at the scattered documents with those heavy, exhausted eyes, showing not an ounce of remorse. "Look, Kyle, open your eyes and look at who we're living with," I yelled, grabbing my husband's uninjured shoulder and forcing him to look up. I was practically hysterical. "Your mother is a fraud. She stole our house fund. She canceled the escrow and took our entire down payment for herself." Kyle slowly shifted his gaze to me, but I didn't see anger in his eyes. I didn't see the shock of a man betrayed by his own mother. I saw pure, animalistic terror. He tried to speak, but only mouthed words soundlessly through his split lip. "You don't even know what's going on." I kept pushing, the words pouring out, mixed with choking tears. I pointed at the promissory note. "She owes $250,000. She's meeting criminals at night to pawn her jewelry. She's extorting $1,200 a month from me, threatening to destroy our marriage if I tell you. And look at the result." I pointed at Kyle's torn, bloody jacket. "Because of her dirty secrets. Those thugs got to you. They beat you." I was gasping for air, wiping my wet cheeks with the back of my hand. "I am not staying in this house another minute. I'm packing my bags. And if you have half a brain, Kyle, you'll leave with me right now. We are calling the police." "Don't you dare," Kyle rasped, suddenly grabbing my wrist so hard I cried out in pain. His fingers were like ice. "No police. Do you hear me?" I yanked my hand away, staring at him like he had lost his mind. He was defending the mother who was ruining our lives? Even after her loan sharks had beaten him bloody? I spun around to head for the stairs to pack my suitcase. But a sharp, metallic sound stopped me in my tracks. Click. Click. Catherine was standing by the front door. She had just turned the deadbolt twice. Slowly, she pulled the key from the lock and dropped it into the deep pocket of her robe. "No one is leaving." Her voice was quiet, but it sent a chill straight down my spine. "Open that door!" I screamed, genuine panic finally setting in. "You have no right! You're a criminal. I'll scream out the window. I'll call the neighbors." Catherine walked slowly toward me. Up close, I suddenly saw something I had missed before. Her face wasn't evil. It was bone-deep tired. The deep lines around her mouth, the gray tint to her skin, the dark bags under her eyes. It was the face of a woman who hadn't slept in weeks, carrying an unbearable, crushing weight. "Scream, Sarah. Break the window if you want," my mother-in-law said quietly, looking me dead in the eye. "But before you do, I want you to ask your perfect husband one question." Catherine slowly raised her hand and pointed at Kyle, who seemed to shrink into the chair, looking like a beaten dog. "Ask him, Sarah," the older woman's voice cracked, "where he goes after his firm closes. And ask him what those loan sharks smell like, the ones he mortgaged your entire life to." I turned to my husband. Kyle had buried his face in his dirty hands, and in the absolute silence of the room, he let out a hollow, pitiful sob. The world shattered like a fragile glass ornament. "I don't understand," I whispered, looking back and forth between them. There was a ringing in my ears. "What loan sharks? What debts? You signed that promissory note. You took the house money." Catherine let out a heavy sigh. She walked over to the coffee table, picked up the crumpled loan document, and handed it to me. "Look closer, sweetheart." "At the signature." I squinted. The letters were swimming, but suddenly it became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't Catherine's elegant cursive handwriting. It was a frantic, jagged scrawl. K. Sterling. Kyle. Gambling addiction, Sarah. The words left Catherine's lips like a death sentence. They hit me right in the chest. Sports betting, online casinos, offshore poker, call it what you want. It's a sickness that eats the soul. 20 years ago, Kyle's father left us without a dime. They even took my winter boots. I thought my son would never repeat that mistake, but blood is a terrifying thing. Kyle whimpered, burying his face deeper into his hands. I backed away from him as if he were radioactive. The puzzle pieces violently snapped together. The audits at work, the bloodshot eyes, the frantic late-night scrolling on his phone. He wasn't working. He was betting. By the time I realized he had relapsed, it was too late. Catherine's voice was almost a whisper. He had maxed out every credit card. When the banks cut him off, he went to people you don't mess with. He fed them promises for weeks. And then I overheard him planning to withdraw your entire house fund to win it all back. Catherine stepped closer. Now I didn't see coldness in her eyes. I saw an endless, agonizing mother's pain. That's why I went to the developer first, using the power of attorney you both left with me. I canceled the contract and moved the money to my account. I became the villain in your story, Sarah, so your husband wouldn't gamble away your last dime. And the money. The money I gave you? My rent? My lips could barely move. Instead of answering, Catherine reached into her robe and pulled out a small plastic card. She placed it on the glass table, right on top of the scattered papers. That's a debit card in your name. Every single penny you gave me is in that account. Down to the last dollar. She smiled bitterly. You were so blind in your love, Sarah. You would have given him everything if he asked for money to fix a problem at work. I had to extort you and hide that cash, so when his house of cards finally collapsed, you wouldn't be left on the street. The tears finally broke through the dam. I covered my face and sank to the floor right where I stood. I had never felt so ashamed in my entire life. I had hated this woman. I thought she was a monster. And this exhausted, aging mother had pawned her family heirlooms to street thugs just to buy her son time and to save a stranger. Me. The room was filled only with the sound of my quiet sobbing. I looked up at Catherine, searching for the words to apologize, but I didn't get the chance. Catherine slowly took the house keys out of her pocket. Her face turned hard as granite once again. Now you know everything, Sarah, she said, dropping the keys next to the debit card. The door is unlocked. You can take your money, pack your bags, and walk out right now. No one will judge you. But if you decide to stay in this house, you have to do something terrifying. I froze, swallowing my tears. For the first time all evening, Kyle looked up, staring at his mother in horror. I looked at the metallic keys. One move and I was free. I could take my money, call an Uber, and erase Kyle from my life forever. It would be logical. It would be right. But I couldn't look away from Catherine. She stood tall, but her hands, hidden in her pockets, were trembling. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice suddenly steady. Kyle flinched as if struck by a whip, looking at me with red, pleading eyes. You have to stop being his wife. For a while, Catherine's voice was hollow, like dirt hitting a coffin lid. No pity, no warm dinners. No, I believe in you, honey. Tomorrow morning, we are checking him into a closed rehab facility. He stays there until the doctors say he's done. And when he gets out, you take his phone, his laptop, and every piece of plastic in his wallet. You give him bus fare and nothing else. He has to earn trust from absolute zero. We have to operate like surgeons, Sarah. Cut through the flesh to save the life. Silence fell over the room again. Only the wind rattling the window panes could be heard. I looked at my husband, the man I loved madly, who used to bring me macarons, and who almost left me homeless because of his weakness. I felt something inside me break, but something much stronger took its place. I walked slowly over to Kyle. He looked at me with pure desperation. Give me your phone. My voice was surprisingly calm, ice cold. Sarah, please. I'll stop, I swear to you. He tried to touch my arm, but I pulled back sharply. The phone. Now. Or I take those keys off the table and you never see me again. Kyle let out a broken sob, his shoulders shaking in defeated surrender. With trembling fingers, he pulled his smartphone out of his pocket and placed it in my palm. I turned around and, without looking back at him, walked over to my mother-in-law. I placed Kyle's phone on the table, right next to the keys. I think we need to pack him a bag for tomorrow, Catherine, I said quietly. For the first time all night, the Iron Lady mask cracked. Catherine's lips trembled, she covered her mouth to hold back a sob, and simply nodded. In that moment, two women realized we were no longer on opposite sides of the trenches. We were the same army, exactly 1 year past. The spring sun bathed the spacious back patio in warm, honey-colored light. The air smelled of wet soil and fresh seedlings. I sat on a wooden stool, wearing a gardening apron, skillfully repotting young hydrangeas into large clay pots. Next to me, leaning against the railing, stood Catherine. She looked entirely different. Her hair wasn't pulled into a severe bun anymore, it fell softly around her shoulders. Her face was brighter, and there were new smile lines around her eyes. "You're overwatering them again, Sarah," she said with fake strictness, sipping herbal tea from her favorite porcelain mug. "The roots will rot, I'm telling you." "They won't rot, Mom," I laughed, wiping a smudge of dirt off my nose with the back of my hand. Calling her Mom felt so natural now, as if I had done it my whole life. "It's a special draining soil. I'm the florist here, remember?" Catherine just snorted, but her eyes were glowing with warmth. The side gate creaked open. Kyle walked down the stone path. He was carrying 2 heavy bags of topsoil on his shoulders. He had lost weight, but the feverish emptiness in his eyes was gone. Instead of a custom-tailored financial advisor's suit, he wore cheap work jeans and a faded t-shirt. For the last 4 months, since getting out of the facility, he had been working a grueling construction job, the only place that hired him without a background check, paying him weekly in cash. Cash that he handed over to me every single Friday, down to the last penny, to pay off the remnants of his debt. He dropped the heavy bags by the patio and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Delivery, as requested." He smiled hesitantly, looking at me. "Do you ladies need anything else?" I critically inspected the soil bags, then looked at my husband. A flash of tenderness crossed my eyes, but I quickly hid it behind a businesslike tone. "That's all for now. Go wash your hands, there's a pie cooling on the counter, and don't forget to plug your phone in on the kitchen island so it's in plain sight." "Yes, boss," Kyle nodded. There was no irritation in his voice, no resentment, just a deep, quiet gratitude that the 2 women in his life hadn't let him rot at the bottom of the abyss. He walked up the stairs and disappeared into the house. I set down my gardening shears and looked at my dirt-stained hands. "Do you think he's going to make it?" I asked quietly, turning to Catherine. My mother-in-law walked closer, set down her tea, and placed her warm, dry hand on my shoulder. "We can never know for sure, honey. That's life. But we did everything we could, and the most important thing," Catherine squeezed my shoulder tightly, "is that whatever happens next, you and I will never be alone." I placed my hand over hers. The birds were singing in the garden. A life shattered into pieces wasn't the end. It was just the raw material to build something new, real, and incredibly strong.